Good evening, everyone. My name's Ebony Nowlin. I'm a Senior Biosecurity Officer for the Sheep and Goat eID project with Local Land Services. I'm based in the Northern Tablelands region. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. So the purpose of the webinar this evening is just to ensure that all New South Wales livestock agents are aware of the upcoming implementation timeline and mandatory requirements for you and your clients. Joining us to present tonight is Matt Jones. Matt is the statewide programs coordinator of the Sheep and Goat eID project, as well as Kiri Broad, and Kiri is the project manager, Sheep and Goat Traceability for the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development. Just a bit of housekeeping, the webinar is being recorded and it will be distributed as soon as possible following tonight, and your microphones are disabled, so I just put in the chat before, but if you have any questions, put them in the chat and we will get to them at the end of the presentations. I'll hand over to Matt now, who will do his presentation, and then we'll move on to some questions when he's finished. Thanks, Matt.
Great. Thank you, Ebony. All right, I'll just endeavour to share my screen. We'll kick straight in. All right, hopefully that's now working.
Yep, we've got it.
Very good. As Ebony said, so my role with this project is with the Local Land Services as the coordinator for sheep and goat for New South Wales. Just quickly before we start, as you're aware, New South Wales DPIID acknowledges that we stand on country which always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and we acknowledge the traditional owners of lands and waters on which we meet today and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I just want to run through quickly the staff that we have in the teams. So starting off with the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development with the sheep and goat traceability team. As you can see on the screen, Kiowa, we have Kiri with us tonight, and Melissa, as well as two industry liaison officers in Brooke Cowan and Ash Wildridge. This is the Local Land Services team, so this is the team that I coordinate. We currently have 8 senior biosecurity officers all around New South Wales, and as you can see there, Central West. We're currently recruiting for that one at the moment and hope to have that position filled by early next year. However, for anyone in that region that may want help or advice, happy to reach out to myself as I'm based in the Central West and out of Dubbo. But for anybody else, feel free to reach out to your local senior biosecurity officer if you have any questions regarding eID for either yourselves outside of the sale yards or for your clients. So I suppose one of the big take homes hopefully that you'll receive tonight and how something we want to try to get across is that as livestock agents, we understand that you will play an integral part in the transition to individual eIDs for sheep and goats. And certainly your cooperation is important to the successful implementation of this project with your relationships and position within the industry, as well as your relationships with your clients and those producers. Won't spend too long on this. Hopefully everybody here will understand or knows what an electronic device is. But just quickly, as you can see, there's an example of an NLIS accredited device on top. It does have that NLIS logo, as you can see on the left-hand side. Part of it has the NLIS ID, and which you will see printed on the outside of the tag and physically print on those tags or devices. And then it has the RFID, which is that number that we only see if we're using some sort of scanning device. The main reason I wanted to touch on this slide and just to make sure everybody is aware is the fact there, as you can see, is the code in the NLIS ID. That middle letter refers to the species code. So these tags are species specific, just like cattle. We can only use cattle tags in cattle. It's the same with sheep. So we can only use sheep tags in sheep. We can only use goat tags in goat. We can't mix them up. It does cause major issues later on down the track. I'm just wanting to run through the timeline quickly. And I'll run through this both from a producer point of view and also for any of the staff that may be here that work in sale yards. So from a producer point of view, which is coming around very quickly, the 1st of Jan next year, that all lambs and kids born after the 1st of January must have an electronic device attached before they leave their property at birth. And all sheep and goats with electronic devices or tags must be recorded individually in the NLAS database for any movement onto the property, and continued with that mob-based movement for sheep and goats with visual tags. And I'll touch on this these two components of it later on, and how we can do both of these in one transaction on the NLAS database, so that we don't have to do two. The next key milestone for us is the 1st of January 27. So the 1st of Jan 27, all sheep and goats, regardless of age, must have an electronic device attached before leaving the property. This means we've got a 2-year transition period for any sheep that are currently born or that are born prior to the 1st of January next year. Those animals can still be moved and sold with the current visual tag up until that 1st of January 27 date. Obviously, as everything will have an electronic tag, there'll be no longer the requirement to do mob-based movements on the database for sheep and goats. In terms of New South Wales sale yard requirements, similarly timeline-wise, so we've got the 1st of Jan coming up. You'll notice there that we've jumped straight into any sheep or goat, regardless of age, must be recorded individually on the NLAS database. So we understand that obviously it's only for, we only have lambs born from that date. However, we have a number of animals already coming through the system that have electronic tags in them, whether or not those are animals that may have come from Victoria now that it's been in there for 7 years, or for those early adopters of producers that have already been using electronic devices on farm for management purposes. Continue to do that mob-based movement for any of the visual tags that come through until we get to that 1st of January 27 date. So obviously we're still going to be recording everything. There'll be no longer the use of visual tags. All sheep and goats will be coming through the sale yards, or will need to be coming through the sale yards with electronic tags or devices, which means that we no longer have to do that mob-based transfer on the database. So as an agent, as I spoke to, it's the collaboration. So as an agent, it's important to understand the requirements for both yourselves as agents and ideally for livestock owners as well, to provide advice to clients if they may need. So informing livestock owners that sheep and goats that aren't properly identified with an NLAS eID tag, if they require it, are not permitted to move according to New South Wales legislation. You may support your clients in their tagging responsibilities where they can purchase tags if they need them. Facilitating NLAS transactions. Now, while it's not a requirement under legislation for agents to do these transfers on behalf of clients, we do know that a number of agents offer this as a service for their clients to do those transactions on their behalf. So it's obviously recommended to have a suitable RFID reader. If you already have one that you're using for cattle, it's the same technology. You can use that to read those devices for sheep and goats. Obviously, the appropriate software to do that NLAS transfer. I just want to run through now some of the, I suppose, key statements and sections that are in the National Livestock Identification System Regulation 2017, and in detail around properly identified livestock. So the definition in the regulation and legislation looks at properly identified stock is not properly identified for the purpose of the regulation if a permanent identifier attached to the stock is either A, unreadable or has ceased to work, or is not accredited for that particular species of stock. That's why I mentioned about the species code earlier. In regarding to unreadable or has ceased to work, that means that they're not properly identified if those animals have a non-reading tag in them, or they're non-readable or unable to be scanned. So those non-readers. So the following, as you can see, the following identifiable stock that has to have electronic devices attached just reiterates through there as well what I went through with the timeline, that sheep and goats born on or after the 1st of January will require them. And then as of the 1st of January 27, all sheep and goats, regardless of age. Should be noted that I've put in there that a sheep and goat that is already electronic identified with an electronic device or ear-tag that's attached to a sheep or goat, even though it's not required to be. So that's where we've got these older sheep, potentially in New South Wales, that already have them. That classifies them then as their proper identification. So identifying stock as a livestock stage outside of the sale yards, and then I'll go through inside or at the sale yards. But if purchasing or selling stock or goats on behalf of a client, it's recommended that you check for missing or damaged NLAS devices and work with the seller to tag any of those animals before they leave the property. In the event that sheep or goats arriving at a new property that are missing an NLAS eID device or it's been damaged, can be fitted with a pink post-breeder tag with the property identification code or PIC of the property that that animal has been moved to. We need to remember to remove the damaged device. So just going through in terms of operating in a sale yard, that the legislation states that a livestock agent must not present for sale sheep or goats that are not correctly identified with an eID device. While the owners of the sheep must ensure that sheep and goats are correctly identified before they're dispatched, livestock agents facilitating their sale are required to ensure that animals are correctly identified before they're sold. Hopefully everybody will be aware of the rules, but for those that may not be, we just want to reiterate that vendors or their agents are not permitted to bring NLAS eID devices printed with the property of dispatch to the sale yards or auction venue unless under the direction of a permit issued by the State Animal Health Authority. In case of New South Wales, that's generally Local Land Services District Vet. So any of those animals that do turn up at a sale yard and that do require a tag, we need to be using that special identifier emergency tag that you would receive from the yards. Some of you may have clients or may be involved in the harvested rangeland goats or HRG. HRG will still remain under that tag-free pathway and movements going forward from the 1st of Jan 25, as long as the property in question where those animals have come from has got a HRG Livestock Production Advisory accreditation, LPA accreditation, and they have the accredited pick. There is a new NVD specifically for HRG goats that will be accessible as of January next year. For additional information, suggesting to visit the Integrity Systems LPA HRG website to run you through what's involved in being accredited and the changes that are coming in there. In terms of sheep and goats, it's fairly straightforward. You just need to switch from the visual tags we're currently using across to electronic identification devices. At this point in time, we've got no changes to pick requirements and no changes to the NVD as well. So a few key points and things to just keep in the back of your mind and to make sure that you're aware of. So with electronic devices, we can only have one electronic device in an animal at any one time. Obviously, this creates issues if we have multiple eIDs in an animal. It is an offence to remove a functioning NLIS device or tag, so we can't remove one and put a new one in of like we potentially may have done previously with visual tags. We're putting post breeders in. The only time that we can remove that NLIS device is if it is a non-reading or non-functioning tag. So that's when we need to replace those lost or non-reading devices. I've said a couple of times now that eID devices are species specific. So we do need to make sure that producers are using the right tag, especially if they do run both sheep and goats. It's just something to maybe mention to them if they are looking at doing tag orders and just checking those tags before they get around to putting them in the animals. It's much easier to fix any issues beforehand than having to re-tag animals. Unlike cattle, electronic devices can be attached to either ear, so either the left or the right ear. This has been a push from industry as a large amount of industry and producers will use left or right ear tags depending on whether they're male or female or for other management purposes. And unlike cattle, we can still use the year of birth colours. So we'll still have the 8-year colour system in place. While it's not mandated that industry or producers use those, it is certainly recommended that they do. The only mandatory colour will be the pink colour, and the pink for being post-breeder tags. Being out and about and talking to agents and producers, but there has been a little bit of confusion at times regarding whose responsibility it is to make sure that that NLIS transfer is completed on the database. So for a sale yard, it's the sale yard's operator, sale yard operator's responsibility to ensure that the transfer is done. The processor, obviously the processor will do that one. And for any property to property movement, or you may see P2P movement, it's the receiver's responsibility. In the majority of cases, the person receiving the stock is responsible to do that movement. Furthermore to that, so the sale yard operator, I won't worry about going through the processor, but we'll go through the sale yard operator as well as the P2P movements. But just bearing in mind, the sale yard operator must upload the prescribed information to the NLIS database, which I'll cover off later on, either on the day of the sale, if the stock had been consigned to an abattoir, or by close of business the next working day for all other stock. One thing I also want to touch on is the definition under the regulation in terms of a sale yard. The definition under the regulation says that a sale yard is a property in which identifiable stock is sold by public auction. So obviously we know that that is a sale yard. Other auctions that also come under this include on-property stud sales, circuit sales, or show type events, or show and sales, or multi-vendor sales. So if you are involved in any of those, just be mindful that if you are operating in those as the agent, that you do fall under the definition of a sale yard, and that responsibility does then fall back on yourself as the selling agent. The only exception to this is if it's clearly stated in the terms and conditions that responsibility sits with the purchaser. But that's obviously a business decision to think about. The property-to-property movements. So I just thought I'd go through and clarify around what classifies as a property-to-property movement. So obviously that's between properties with different PIC numbers as part of normal management. So that may be producers that have multiple properties with different PIC numbers. If they're moving them from one property to the next, they will need to do that individual transfer for those animals that have electronic tags between those properties. Also covers off any time we've got adjustment. Obviously, after being sold, they're going to be more than likely moving to a different PIC to and from shows, whether that's local shows or state shows or rural shows. If they're travelling along a TSR or travelling stock reserve or row, or for any other purpose, even if the stock remain in the same ownership. So it doesn't necessarily mean that those animals have to be sold. They can remain under the same ownership as well. So as I mentioned earlier, those P2P transfers, they come under the legal responsibility of the receiver of those animals. They must occur within 2 days of the movement. And as I mentioned earlier, the transfer includes, so the information that we need to do a transfer for this is the RFID number or LISID from PIC to PIC, either the serial number of the National Vendor Deck or ENVD, or of a TSS, of a transported stock statement, if there's not the need to have an NVD with that movement. We need the date that the stock arrived and number ahead. Now that's important. It's additional that you may be something you haven't seen as yet. With the transfers, it is a new part of the NLIS database for sheep and goats, and it comes into effect when we're doing individual movements on the database. And this is where it allows us to be able to do both a mob-based movement and an electronic movement in one transaction, that we don't have to do both. This is what it will look like. So this is a producer login. Hopefully most of you will be similar to what this is have seen, where we enter the RFID numbers on the left-hand side under one. We've got our to PIC, our from PIC, the waybill number or serial number of the NVD or TSS, when they were moved, and the number ahead. What this allows us to do is, say, for example, we have a mixed consignment, which we may potentially have over this transition period for the next couple of years. But say, for example, there was 500 head total in the consignment, but only 200 of those had RFIDs or electronic tags. Then we would upload the 200 electronic ID numbers into it. But over on the right-hand side under question 6, we would add in the total consignment number being 500 in this example. What this will do is it will create two transfers, one for the individual transfer of the 200 and a mob-based transfer for the full 500. And you'll receive two NLS upload IDs to indicate that they have both been done together. This just means that we don't have to go and do an individual transfer and then a mob transfer. Tries to cut down on paperwork for either yourselves if you're doing them for your clients or for the producers themselves. I might quickly just hand over to Kiri to cover off on this. We're most of the way through, and then we'll have plenty of time, hopefully, for some questions.
Thanks, Matt. So hopefully everyone's aware of the tag discount program that we're operating. So it opened on the 1st of November, and it's providing a 76 cent discount. So that's including GST for the 2025 NLS accredited white eID devices. So these could be tags or leg bands. If anyone has goats that they require leg bands for. So people can purchase them from retailers or directly from the manufacturers. Everyone applies a 76 cent discount at the point of sale. And then the manufacturers will pass that on to yourselves if you're doing it through your merch store. And then they'll receive that back from us, obviously. So it's open until the 31st of October 2025, with the caveat that unless funds are exhausted early. Now, I know last time the rebate scheme was exhausted quite quickly, with the auto drafters especially. We definitely don't expect this to be exhausted near as fast. So yeah, we expect it to go out a lot further, close to that 31st of October date. So the discount can be applied on one order per pick for orders under 3,500 devices. So that's total devices that people might be needing. So if people need to purchase more than 3,500, so 3,501 and over, they will need pre-approval to do so. And that's just about us managing, any kind of tag hoarding and making sure that we can, ensure this program is fair for everyone to access. And we've been requested by industry to put in that pre-approval system. So we've put that in place. But with pre-approval, we understand that there's going to be some fairly large tag orders that will come through over 3,500. So we're basically allowing those orders to be split over more than one order, when we understand that people might have split lambings or, with those large numbers of stock. So the pre-approval form, it's basically an online form, and then we do checks in the background, and then we issue a certificate that people can then provide to their manufacturer, that the manufacturer will require to process any order above 3,500 or 3,501. So that's found on our website. If you go to our homepage, you'll see a little box, can't think what it's called, that's for the tag discount page. So if you click that, all the information's on a tag discount page. So yeah, it's been open, pre-approval's been open for over 6 weeks now. So yeah, we've got plenty of people getting pre-approval through the system, plenty of retailers helping people. So if you have any questions, reach out, but the information's on there. And yeah, as people start to get their tag numbers known, they can start ordering for next year's tags. Happy to answer any questions on that afterwards.
Great. Thanks, Kiri. And as Kiri mentioned, so for more information, we can go to the website. There is a tiles there and dedicated resources for all stakeholders within the industry, from producers to agents, to go through. We also have some online training modules or training if you want further information regarding roles and responsibilities for agents on there, which is accessible under the training and learning tiles. The QR code on your screen, that will allow you to sign up to the eID newsletter. That newsletter is sent out, and it's the best and quickest and easiest way to stay up to date with information as we move through this transition period going forward. Alternatively, if you do have additional questions, certainly feel free to reach out and send an email to the email you can see on the bottom of the screen there at sheepgoateid@dpi.nsw.gov.au. Well, that does bring me to the end, so I might stop sharing, and that way I'll be able to see if we've got any questions coming through.
None yet,
chat,
Matt,
so
but
please,
if anyone's got questions, please put them in the chat.
could have spoken for much longer, but
if anyone doesn't want to type, Ebony, they can put their hand up and we can unmute maybe?
I don't know that we can. Everyone's just automatically disabled. Yeah.
I thought there was an option to like allow the mic or something. Maybe not. That's all right.
I've got a couple of questions that we received beforehand that I can ask Kiri and Matt if no one else here has questions at the moment.
Sounds good.
Right. So what will agents need to do if they're scanning sheep through a draft, say at a sale yards, and there's non-readers or a non-reader? What's their responsibility?
I'm going to take this, Matt.
Yep, no dramas at all.
Yeah, sure. So I guess what that, Matt touched on it before, but basically to present animals for sale, they do need to be properly identified, and to be properly identified, they need to have a tag or have a functioning tag. And so those tags will need to be replaced. Again, as mentioned, we can't call up people and ask them to bring their own tags down there, so it'll have to be reissued with a special eID or tag from the sale yard, which the LLS will provide to the sale yard. I know there's been some questions around what cost that is. That's not dictated by LLS. That would be dictated or set by the sale yard and the agents at what they agree that they would like to charge for that, replacement service. So, but yeah, it does need to be replaced to ensure that the animal is properly identified.
Beautiful. Thanks, Kiri.
Yeah, and I suppose
sorry.
I'll just add to that. I suppose from an operational side of things, and I suppose I should have mentioned this at the start. So, my background and prior to being with LLS, in here was that I was a livestock agent. Spent most of my time in Victoria for nearly 10 years down there. So I had rolled in terms of an operational, inside the sale yards that they're coming through, and we're drafting them with those scanners. Obviously we're not going to know that those animals are a non-reader until after they've gone through they've been drafted and been scanned. If there is a large number potentially that it looks like haven't been scanned for whatever reason, suggestion would be to run those animals back around if time permits. Obviously understand that doesn't always the case. What can happen is that we can continue on. You could pen those animals and scan those animals in the pen to find those non-readers if we need to. Some of the sale yards are looking to employ contractors to do that mop-up scanning and re-tagging as a service. So that's obviously sale yard dependent, and you'd need to obviously talk to your sale yard about that and the sale yard manager if that's going to be the case.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Kiri. There's just a question in the chat. Has the compliance rate for sale yards eID tag scanning been set for next year? So what's the compliance rate?
I'll take this one too. So obviously under regulation, it says that all tags must be replaced if they're non-functioning or lost, but we understand that 100% is a difficult number to achieve in reality. So yeah, 98% is the rate. That's achievable. We're seeing it in other centres. And basically we're going straight to 98. So I know when Victoria started, they kind of worked their way up to that number. We're not having targets set before that. We're going straight to 98 as quick as we can. So yeah, as long as everyone's doing their utmost to make sure that they are trying to find animals that don't have tags, that may be non-reading. And we're trying to get up to that high compliance. Then that's what we're looking for. So can confirm that.
Beautiful. Thanks, Kerry.
Sorry, I'll add to that. Like, yeah, if it's kind of there's 2 there, but it's 98, so we'll let them go. And you can pinpoint the 2, obviously put the tag in. But we know that, like I said, 100% in every mob is not achievable, and you could spend 5 hours trying to find the non-functioning one to replace it. So, 98%.
Another question in the chat. My question is in regard to sale yards. Can you talk us through the process when sheep are unloaded and the technology used, example, all flex scanning system, and the use of Android devices? Could you also advise if any specific Android devices are recommended be used? The process of scanning into the yards. Probably a good one for you, Matt.
Yeah, that's all right. Look, it will be different from sale yard to sale yard. We understand that no 2 sale yards are run or operated the same with it. So it will depend. The process will depend, I suppose, a little bit. I'm happy to reach out, and talk through specific sale yards later on if we would like. But essentially, depending what software you use, there'll be 2 main types of software that'll be used in sale yards in New South Wales. Those being outcross systems and AgriNows. The outcross system being Stockyard is the name of their program that they'll use. The animals will come off and be unloaded as they normally would be. We would need to receive those animals into the software, generally using some sort of device. That can, at that point in time, it can be Apple or ISO or Android device for that function of it. The only caveat to that, or where I suppose in regards to Florence's question regarding Android devices, is that the Allflex scanners, so the sale yards that have the 3-way scanning devices at the drafts, the Allflex technology can't talk with Apple. So that's where we need to have an Android device at the draft to be able to connect to that. Outside of that, the software can talk with Apple for penning, creating consignments, clerking, and delivery. iOS devices can be used. In terms of specific advice on devices, probably don't have any, and B, we can't provide that. My only suggestion to you, if you are thinking about which device to buy, my suggestion would be talk to the software provider in that specific sale yard. They've got experience operating both of those systems in Victoria now for 7 years. They'll know which are working and which aren't. And if you do have connections in Victoria as well for agents that are operating in those sale yards, I'd suggest talking to them as well.
And my only other consideration, Matt, would be, whether people are going to want a tablet size or a plus size phone or a normal size phone. That's going to be the consideration as well.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously we understand everyone having a tablet, big bulky tablet, it's not easy if you've got to try to put that down and grab a hold of a sheep or do something. A lot of staff have decided that they want to use phones and will continue just using their phone while that, it just makes it a little bit easier. But I suppose you could look into hard cases and lanyards and that sort of thing as well. So.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Kerry. Another question that I had, what will agents need to do if a mob of sheep are delivered to the yards with no tags? We sort of went over this, but what's their responsibility or their options if they have a vendor that shows up with no tags in their sheep?
Yeah, the legislation is quite clear. The rules aren't changing. as part of the implementation, the rules around untagged stock haven't changed from how it has been under the current visual system. So any of those animals that turn up that are untagged or aren't properly identified, I suppose is the technical term, those animals will need to have either a special identifier or emergency tag attached to those animals before sale. Yeah, and that decision obviously, would be made with the agents whether or not if it is a very large percentage or the whole consignment that those animals may be pulled from the sale. Doesn't mean that the producer, sorry, they could be pulled and sent home. However, that doesn't remove the fact that the producer still has done the wrong thing under the legislation and potentially committed an offence. But maybe cheaper option than paying for tags for a large amount of emergency tags.
Just got another comment in the chat box. Jamie said, thanks, Matt. You mostly answered this, but to clarify, please, for 2025 and 2026, with untagged sheep at sale yards that are born before 1st of Jan 2025, should they be required to be tagged at the sale yard with a visual sheep tag or an eID tag?
Yeah, so that transition period, and look, that decision will come up by a case-by-case basis between sale yards to come up with how they want to proceed with it. From a legal requirement and legislative requirement, those animals only need to be retagged with a visual tag for those animals or any animals that are born prior to the 1st of Jan 25. However, some sale yards may choose to abandon the visual tag and go across to having eID tags only. Just makes it a little bit more simple. You've only got one tag. You're not trying to work out the age of it and how that's. But said from a legislative point of view, they still can have a visual tag. Hopefully that answers the question.
I do know one sale yard that's gone that way, Matt, that they've just ordered new tags and they've just ordered all EIDs to make their life simple.
But yeah, that's up to individual sale yards and associations to come up with that along with the price.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Another question that I've got, if there's agents that are thinking that they haven't had training in this software, like say in a sale yard environment, and just thinking they're worried they need that training before the 1st of January when they've got to start scanning, who's responsible for making sure they have that training?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. So we've been working with the sale yard operators to make sure all the equipment's installed by the 1st of January so that that's all there for everyone to be able to meet the time frame of 1st of January scanning. So in the first instance, I would be talking to the sale yard operator. So whether that's the local council or a privately owned sale yard, chat to them. They should be the ones providing training to the agents at that facility in the use of the equipment and the software that they've chosen to use at that facility. So yeah, reach out in the first instance. If you have any issues, please reach out to our team and we'll try and work with you on that to get that in place. But yeah, speak to them in the first instance.
Thanks, Kerry. I've just got a couple more, so if anyone has questions, please put them in the chat box before we finish. So if agents or their clients are buying or selling through online platforms like Auctions Plus or Stock Live, you've probably already touched on this a bit, Matt, but whose responsibility is that to do that NLIS database transfer in that case?
Yeah, no, good question. And it's probably something I didn't really touch on during that presentation of mine. But yeah, so any of the online selling platforms, it comes under, it doesn't fall under the definition of a sale yard. So it comes under a private treaty sale for those online only sales of preference that by saying online only. Private treaty sale, so it's the receivers or the purchaser's responsibility to do those transfers on it. I do obviously know that as assessors for the likes of Auctions Plus and that sort of thing, that there is an option on there as a selling agent to do the transfer of those stock. As a service, the responsibility comes back on the purchaser or the receiver of those animals for those.
Great, thank you. Another one, will there be any training available for agents' clients around the NLIS database if they've never used it or need to start using it a bit more?
Yep, I can answer that. Yes, so I suppose the simple answer is yes, there will be. So as part of the staff at LLS and the senior biosecurity officers have recently undertaken intensive NLIS database training with the intention that this LLS will be able to run specific workshops and events for producers to understand how to use the NLIS database, to upskill, to go through all the functions and functionalities of the database, and we'll be looking to start to roll those out early next year. So yeah, reach out if you've got certain towns or locations where you would like those run, but we will be organising those in the new year.
And where can they find these events and workshops advertised?
On the website?
Yeah, so the events on the Sheepgoat eID website, there's an events tile there that has all upcoming events that any of our staff will be attending coming up all around the state. Alternatively, feel free to look on the LLS website under events as well, and they'll also be there as well, and you can search by regions for those if you are interested.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the questions that I've got. If nobody else has any they want to pop in the chat. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Everyone's ready for 1st of January, which is great.
Beautiful. All right, well, if no one has any questions, we'll leave it at that. So thank you everyone for taking the time to tune in, and thank you so much, Matt and Kiri, for presenting and answering everyone's questions. And yeah, if you're leaving this thinking I've still got questions, or you think of something later on, please reach out to either DPI or your local SBO. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate that for any agents that are on here, I would strongly suggest that you do reach out to your local land services senior biosecurity officer for eID in your area. If you haven't already met them, get to know them, and more than happy to work with you to support events for your clients.
I was going to add too, if you don't have their contact details, that's also on the website. There's our team, I think, tile. And so everyone's contact details are on there. So that'll be the best way. Or email us and we can put you in touch.
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, we'll get this organised and sent out to you all as well. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. See you later.